So here it begins, or ends, I can't really tell. Overture, dream the beginning. It was none in all its purity. If you could see it now, it would mean nothing to you. Just boring slides of familiar settings, just like your grandma used to show them, describing the events of her trip to wherever land with a low voice when you could barely keep your eyes open. But I can't fall asleep now. Never again. It's too much. You don't know what I'm talking about, but there's much that even I don't have a clue about. It's strange how you can't really comprehend most of the things happening in your own mind. There was a time when it drove me mad, but I've learned to accept it. You know how you sometimes find mysterious things fascinating, but when you see the whole truth in its real light, it doesn't really seem that interesting anymore. I suppose some things are just better kept as mysteries. If you don't go to sleep now, sweetie, you won't be able to wake up in the morning. Yeah, I've heard that one before. But you know, when your day ends, mine only begins. Haven't you learned we live in totally different time zones? Alright, but don't blame me if you'll miss school again. I won't be the one to wake you up. Shut up already, I thought to myself, whining all day long. No wonder she's middle-aged. 1:33 p.m., all things well. I closed the computer and tottered to the bathroom in the dark. Everyone was asleep except me. That's how it always was. I'm the night crawler of the family. My little sister's door was ajar and I could hear her mumbling in her sleep again. I want those flea sweaters and flea pants. I silently broke a smile, wondering what kind of world she was in right now. Everyone has their own, so no two are alike. That's the beauty of it. I slightly opened the door. She was having her orange phase right now. In the dark, I could see the moon-illuminated room with its burning orange walls and furniture that even the night couldn't cover. With my sister carelessly wrapped in her orange quilt like a marmot, humming in her sleep in a way that is only possible for carefree children like her, who aren't trying to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Even her hair was orange. I closed her sleeping door, trying to avoid the night waking her up. Kicked the cans of purple paint from her last week's purple period out of the way and marched back to my room. My own walls had pictures of Bambi and small bears hugging each other, smiling at amorous birds under a colorful rainbow. A small reminder of the previous resident of the room, my big brother. He had lived in this room for as long as I can remember, but they put him away. I'm not supposed to talk about it. Your thoughts are something no one can hear. At least I hope so. I crawled under my Mowgli bedspread and glanced at the few stars that could be seen through my tiny hole-in-the-wall window. I tried to paint the night sky, sweeping the dark parts with my palm and blocking stars with my thumb. Those stars had probably never heard of me, and here I was sweeping them out of sight like it was nothing. I stopped because I felt I was making the stars visible. Maybe they could see everything. I didn't want them to be mad at me. It's funny how an insignificant thumb of one insignificant person can hide a gigantic stars millions of light years away, and so easily. See you in the morning, I whispered softly to my eyes and let them have a rest. And see I would. Hey, there he is! I looked behind me and tried to search for the source of the approaching scream, whose target was obviously your Ubiquitous Mad Enlightener. Two men came running right towards me. As a reflex, my legs began to take steps, slowly building into a ferocious run, a run I had no control over. What are you doing? I screamed at my legs, but there was no response. Tongue-tied, huh? The two men came approaching. I quickly glanced back and briefly saw their faces. They were vague and blurry, with no real shape or normal body parts. Horrible, anonymous beings that otherwise seemed normal. The other one had a vomit green suit and brown corduroy pants. The other was wearing weary jeans and a blue t-shirt. Only their formless faces were like plasticine that barely showed the muscle movements underneath. They ran at me like raging bulls, and I felt the hackneyed cobblestone road withdraw beneath me and slide like a large conveyor belt. On this assembly line I was being treated like the defective can of pea soup on my way to disposal and recycling. A frightening rite of passage that every can fears and hates like the plague. During my befogged panic, I had lost myself, but was now painfully regaining connection to a reality I didn't want to be part of. Suddenly I felt a light dab on my shoulder and looked back. A faceless creature stared at me not a feet away, with his skin face moving, but staring in absolute silence, only the, I guess, wind howling around. For a lasting second I stared at it, like a disease that was chasing me in the form of a tripe man. That horrid mug devoured me along with this world and grew faster than the fear, clenching my insides and mercilessly ripping everything out. Empty. The revolting flat visage pushed its cheek against mine so close I could have licked me with its non-existent tongue, and the living skin morbidly fondled my neck like a repulsive pervert. I felt like spewing, tore my shoulder away from him, and started running as fast as possible, crossing the line where it became impossible. No world was around me, I only ran. Nothing else existed, with the opaque glaze of rusted streetlights spinning around and dilapidated houses and blocks forming a glowing circle around me like a disk of enigmatic sparkling reality. I shut my eyes from the world and ran aimlessly away. I felt the street pressed against my cheek. It was impure from all the filth this town had to bear. Vomit-stained cobbles, rusty trash cans, a pallid world, only different shades of grey everywhere. I was aching all over, but barely managed to stand up on my feet, staggering. I remember running, and those eerie faces. What a phantasm. It felt so real. I looked up. Even the sky was grey and tedious in this comfortless reality. Whatever happened to this place, or the grisly neighborhood? Every sound here was dead. No cats skulking on the fences, no romping kids running about. Dead silent. I hesitantly took a step down the curving alley and down the slapping staircase. No one could have lived here, but I instinctively tried to tread as quietly as I could. After a rather long stroll and a few dozen stairs, I came to a deserted terrace and a blind alley. On the left side of the path there was an old dented door that, residents or not, seemed to be locked from the inside. On the right, a square hole broke the rock wall. It was like a nest you could crawl into. I stepped down the hole and took a look inside. To both ways stretched out a narrow tunnel like a tube, barely wide enough for one person to go in lengthwise. The walls of the tunnel were made of old wood that had cracked from several places. I've never seen anything like it. I wonder what it's for. Hey! Me still scrutinizing the tunnel, startled and knocked my head on the brim of the hole. Ouch! I glanced back. The door was open and a small woman was standing behind me. She was young, probably around her 20s, and sort of beautiful in a strange, elvish way. I assumed her hair had once been blonde, but it was all shaggy, as was her whole appearance. Old greyish clothes, something on her feet you could barely call shoes, and a stained, pale skin. She was carrying a baby. Hey, you're a human, right? Haven't seen one of you here in a while. What do you mean? You're a human, aren't you? She broke out laughing and threw a cute smile at me. I see you're not from around here. I'll leave the door open. Saying this, she turned and walked back inside. I could see the worn-out room through the door. There were no lights, and the whole apartment was bathing in the darkness. This girl didn't seem at all dangerous or frightening, so I stepped into the unknown. Close the door behind you. They can be surprisingly anxious when you give them a chance. Who's they? Why, they're speechless, of course. I realized asking any more questions would seem obtrusive, so I kept my mouth shut and walked around in the room. For being such an intriguing girl's apartment, it was awfully depressing. Burnt and bent spoons lying on tables and on the floor. Worn-out furniture, dried-up stains on the floor and the walls. And dim everywhere. I fumbled about in the dark, hitting tables and stepping on spoons that were lying on the floor. The girl sat down on a tottered chair and took up a spoon from the table. She lit up a small fire with a lighter resembling device, put a white pill on the spoon and started to sear it, with the pill slowly starting to boil. Hey, what are you doing? Stop that, I yelled. She glanced up with a surprised look in her eyes. What is it? Did you want to ask something? Those are drugs! Don't you know what they do to you? She looked at the melted pill, confused. What do you mean? I always do this. Everyone does. She took a short break. Mother did it just like this. I learned to do it from her. And where is your mother now? Not here, I guess. When we still used to sleep, I woke up once and she wasn't here anymore. I stared at her, astonished. This was obviously something I couldn't understand and didn't even want to. I sat down on a frayed armchair, leant my head on my hands and sighed. What is going on here? I mumbled to myself. She went back to boiling the powder and suddenly gulped the whole thing down her throat. What did you do that for? I don't know, my mother always used to do it like this. Why didn't that surprise me? So, do you have a name? Name? Oh, you mean what they used to call me when there still was a they. Mila shenyedenka chasucha kachandu eligia korgu. Can I call you Mila? Why would you do that? But I guess so, it doesn't really matter. Alright. Can you tell me what this place is and what that strange hole is outside? Place? Is there something else than this? I looked at her for a second and sighed. There was nothing she could tell me. But that hole outside, it's called a blurp. It takes you somewhere. Blurp. That's lame. That's what my mother always called it. So if it takes you nowhere, why don't you leave? Leave? But I don't know if it's true. What if it doesn't take you anywhere? It can't be fun hanging around in nothing. Everything is somewhere. You should go and... Suddenly I stopped. I saw a small mound underneath Mila's hem, but she didn't seem to notice it. I stared at it frozen still. A round head appeared from underneath her clothes. I don't know if you've noticed, but you're staring at my crotch like a pervert. I glanced up at her. But there's a... I pointed at her crotch and she looked down. A small baby... A small baby-like head looked up with thin eyes and pointy ears. It started laughing, thumped on the floor, and began rolling around. Why didn't I tell you to stay inside? Get back to your uterus right now. Who's the goofy human? His trachea is pulsing, seems to be a serious case of pre-work stress. I haven't seen anything so bad since 1892. Oh, you humans always acting so solemn with your parochial ponderings and narrow-minded philosophy. Socrates, Einstein, Mozart, ha! All fools. Back inside now, I told you, you're not ready for the world yet. To be so dependent of another being, what does a super genius have to do to get rid of their mothers around here? The baby crawled back between her legs, muttering something about the death of all humans and the rise of elitism. I'm so sorry. He's always so eager to get out, but I won't let him. I started feeling very uncomfortable and got up. I'm sorry, but I really have to leave now. I'm going to take the blurb to wherever it decides to take me. I walked outside and crawled into the hole. I glanced at Mila for a goodbye, but the door was already slammed shut. Everything was still as a painting, grey. She had probably already forgotten about me. This was how life went on. Blurb, take me anywhere. I was lying on my back in the tunnel and looked over my stomach at the endless dark tunnel ahead. Suddenly I started to feel... a light breeze on my neck. It started to become stronger, and I slowly began to slide along the tunnel. My speed increased quickly into a frenzied ride. The wide cracks in the walls kept scratching at my back, and as the speed increased, I could feel them ripping deep wounds into my flesh. I screamed in agony, but the ride couldn't be stopped. All the blood packed into my head, and I started feeling dizzy. Where was I going to end up? Everything became misty as I closed my eyes, shooting to anywhere. Please, please end. Third movement, Nightmare on Smile Street. And everywhere came. The strange world was ceaselessly staring at a new sight. Something lying on the virgin soil in a deep sleep-like coma. Nothing like that had been seen or imagined. Not the smallest bit of familiarity.
Looky, he finger moving. What if he kill all us? He no looky dangerous. Hey, he eyes open.
I could barely move. A fuzzy sight became clear. I looked up at the sky's huge eyes! Ah! I sat up and crawled back, frightened. Two weird-looking creatures stared at me, astonished. They were at least 15 feet tall, but looked like two happy teddy bears. The horizon surrounded us all around. The burp was nowhere to be found. I tried to look for the scars of the nightmarish ride. Nothing. Like it never happened.
He weird, can speak, and so big. What if he really want to kill us? We ask if you no afraid. Me never afraid, but he's so big.
He is.
But we no if you no ask, yes?
They came closer. I stared at them confused. This world looked strange. Otherwise it seemed like a normal field, but everything was distorted and unnatural. The sky looked like a small dot with the earth bent around. It was like we were inside a crystal ball. Suddenly I turned my head and the two were staring at me with round, innocent eyes. Can you tell me where I am? And who are you? They looked at each other and shrugged. Both smiled so hard it looked like their cheeks were going to rip open, but it still looked easy. Somewhere from the sky a spotlight was directed at them. I glanced up, but it was too high to be seen. Both placed a gigantic top hat on their heads and made a pose. They started singing simultaneously.
We big go and low, we friendlies and we live here in Hee-Hee-ville. We happy, everyone happy.
They raised their arms and smiled like a couple of morons. The light disappeared and they put the top hats back to... I stared at them behind my eyebrows. Your names are Ko and Lo. That's stupid. Couldn't they have invented longer names for you two? Remembering Mila's real name, I gave a laugh. As long as you don't go too far.
You know like our names.
A huge teardrop appeared in the corners of their eyes and their faces became stiff. But they forced themselves to hold that annoying, pretentious smile and laughed nervously with a desperate look in their eyes. You can't be serious. Look, I don't even care anymore. Can you just take me to somewhere?
Yes, follow us. We can take you to town.
Saying this, they took one step and stopped.
You come or no?
I got up and tried to get used to walking again. As soon as I took one step, the whole surroundings changed drastically. Mountains moved with every step and arched behind me. I walked up to Ko and Lo and suddenly a large town gate appeared in front of us.
We're here.
They smiled. This place really was strange. I walked behind them into the village. Above the gate there was a sign that read Hee-Hee-ville, happy all day, next to an irritating, smiling face of a teddy bear. What a nightmare. I looked up at Ko and Lo as they pranced along the main street. Like them, all the houses were enormous. Some of the roofs were so high I couldn't even see them. On one of the balconies there was an old lady bear hanging out laundry.
Hello, boys. Isn't it a happy day? Oh, yes, Mrs. La. Good day for smiles and laugh. Hee-hee, yes.
Suddenly the lady glanced at me and dropped her fresh laundered sheet on the ground. A glazed stare spread into her eyes.
Ah! Giant! Giant!
She ran away screaming, and overly cute bears began rushing out to the street. There weren't many inhabitants in this village, merely a dozen, and despite of what you may think, they all had their noticeable characteristics. It was fairly easy to separate one from another. They all stared at me, gasping, as if I was some kind of monster. I started to become jumpy and walking around nervously. I didn't understand. I could barely reach the knees of these bears, and yet they were calling me a giant.
Stop, he don't want to kill us. He see our dance. No bad giant.
Giant like your dance? Cohen Low looked at me for an answer.
Jesus, yes, I like the dance, whatever you say.
Everyone in the bear mob looked at each other, nodding.
Yay, here good giant, we smile and laugh, hee hee hee.
Kill me. I spent the day among the Hihivillians, and they had a big colorful party for their new smiling giant. A whole day of laughter and smiling. Now I truly know the meaning of hell. That night they tucked me between rainbow sheets, and I tried to sleep in this laughing city. In the evening, Hihi village quieted down, but the lights were left on because
Hihi villagers don't like dark, no.
But I managed to get some sleep. Later that night, I woke up briefly to the sounds coming from outside. The sun had set, and it was dark. I looked outside through my bedroom window. Oh, what I saw in the glare of a fire that had been put up in the village square. All doors had been slammed open, and all the villagers had gathered up, and we were sitting on their knees around the bonfire, everyone performing certain moves simultaneously and humming a mantra. This was a ritual. But they looked different. Their happy, colorful skin had turned dead black in their faces. What horrid creatures were they? Even looking at them was enough to make you want to die. A deep shadow hung above the village as they took turns sticking their hands into the fire and letting their skin mutilate, laughing, but not like during daytime. It was insane. Suddenly the spotlight appeared again. In the glare of the fire, one of the villagers pointed his finger at another one. They all gathered around him, humming that ogreish mantra. Then it happened. All of them pulled out a knife and began slicing the one in the middle. They kept poking their knives into the chosen's flesh, ignoring his rending screams. With a focused, horribly calm look on their face, they slashed his corpse. After a time, I couldn't realize they stayed standing still and put back their knives. One of them put out the fire, and they all returned back home, calmly closing their doors. The mutilated corpse was left alone, never smiling again.
Goody morning,
I heard from somewhere far away. Oh no, I had the weirdest dream. I looked down like searching for my head if last night's horror was real. It was impossible to tell.
You coming to eat good breakfast? We make pancakes.
They looked at each other with eyes shining.
Pancakes!
Suddenly my eyes felt wild, and for seconds I saw fleeting images of the black and the creatures. That horrible silence. Covering my eyes, I fell on the floor.
Oh, giant, no good. What wrong?
What was that?
You roll on the floor and writhe and scream. What do you see?
My eyes were burning and the world twisted around me. Cohen Low didn't look like themselves. The fire burned my sight through them. I stared beneath their skin at the...
We take you to eat pancakes now. We have yummy, wummy jello, too.
I stood up on my knees and tottered down the narrow staircase with a little help from the Teddy twins. We sat down at a huge wooden table, me on one side and Cohen Low on the other. The table was groaning under the weight of pancake-filled plates taller than myself. There was also hot cocoa with whipped cream and head-sized mugs painted with flowers and a plate of weird fruits I'd never seen before. Cohen Low were stuffing themselves with pancakes and fruits like there was no tomorrow. Can I ask you a weird question?
Yes, we like answer giants' questions. Ask.
It may be nothing, but I had this weird dream last night.
Oh, dreams. We love dreams with sunshine and smiling always.
Yeah, because you don't get that enough in your real life. They looked at each other confused, but were still bent over the table waiting to listen to anything I said. My dream wasn't really like that, you see. I remember waking up in the dream, and when I looked outside the window, I saw...
Yes?
All the bears in the town were around this fire, and your skins were black. It was so horrible. It hurts just to remember. I rested my head on my fingers. One of the bears pointed at another one, and all of you started stabbing him quietly. And not even your faces changed. Even you two were there. You stabbed him to death and walked home. You left him alone in the dark, I sighed. But I don't know where it came from. It was just a weird nightmare. I looked up at Code and Low. What the... They stared at me, their eyes pulsing, blood veins slowly taking over, and their eyes turning blood red. Cole stood up, staring into space. Oh! He burst out an ear-murdering shriek. Low got up right beside him with that same stare. Ah! Two voices blended together, creating a horribly distorted and harmonious river of sounds. The air around was rapidly heating up. Dum, 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 dum. My heart was beating like crazy. Through the door, I could hear doors slamming open, and that same noise filling every corner of the town. I got up, nervous, but Cone and Low were ignoring me. Empty stare in their eyes. I screamed, covering my ears from their nightmarish chanting. Suddenly the door was slammed open, and masses of giant bears poured into the room. They grabbed my both arms and started violently pulling me outside. The light outside was pale and grey, nothing like yesterday's sun. I was taken to the small hill at the end of the main street. Underneath the fire there was a staircase leading underground. The darkness swallowed everything else. You couldn't even see your own hand. The two bears aggressively released my arms and threw me into the tunnel where it was always night. I was dashed on the floor and felt the cold, smooth tiles on my cheek. With much difficulty due to the narrow walls, I turned back and started crawling up the staircase in haste to get out. Black eyes stared silently at me from the outside. A second's moment of silence between our eyes was infinite. Here I was. A giant rock was rolled to shut the opening. The boulder slammed shut in front of my eyes, and I lost balance, trundling down the stairs on the cold floor. All light was gone. My every move echoed down the tunnel, and the sounds seemed to go on forever in something unknown. From somewhere within, I felt a painful despair rising to the surface. Desperately, my knees let down and I sat on the floor. In the dark, beyond any living soul's reach, I started weeping. Fifth movement. Smile in the dark. There's no way out. Life here is worse than death. End your life, dude. Suicide, suicide, suicide. Darkness made the most hidden feelings fill my every thought. The walls were smooth and there was nothing on the ground. I couldn't kill myself even if I wanted to. Sun smiling, flowers playing, death, death. Sigh. Every second felt like weight on my shoulders. Opening or closing my eyes made no difference. Wet, cold, dark. I just want to go home. I want to drink hot cocoa and then crawl between warm sheets. I want. I can. I just want to. For a moment I could feel the soft blanket around me and looking at the night sky again. A warm sleep. I felt the cold water soaking through my pants. My leg was freezing and numb. Like small needles, the cold broke my skin. Dirt got into the sores in my hands. Burn! I guess I opened my eyes and looked around, not seeing anything. I knew I could stay here sitting until I starved or swallow my fear and crawl forward into the tunnel. I wanted to go, but it was like every part of my body was glued to the walls. Leaving seemed impossible. I just couldn't do it. There was no way. Sitting here was so easy. I wouldn't have to do anything, so why should I go? This was what I needed to do to save myself. As I got on my knees, wearied, I felt some energy coming back. I slowly took one step into the tunnel. Squeal! I felt my heart stop. For a while, I stayed completely still, not even breathing. Fumbling about the floor, my hands felt a small furry thing just next to my knee. The little thing's heart was pounding fast. I could feel it pulsing with my fingers. He was shivering. I took the creature on my palms. Hello, what's your name? Thing. I wish I could see you. You feel like a small furry animal, like a mole or a marmot. What's a little mole doing in this tunnel? Frightened mole. Maybe we can keep each other company. Has the world abandoned you too? I know what you mean. What will I call you? I don't want to come up with a name for you. You might not like it. I'll just call you friend. Through the impenetrable darkness, I could swear I saw friend subtly smiling, and his eyes glowing. You never know when just one step into the right direction can bring something that changes your life forever. I let friend crawl into my pocket, and together, warming each other in the cold, one step at a time, we crawled into the night. Warm. Sixth movement, roller coaster savior. A friend was quietly snickering in my ear. We'd been crawling inside the tunnel for hours, days, weeks. Time here was dead, and what came to the surroundings, nothing had changed. The dark was so thick our eyes couldn't get used to it. But friend, I could see all the time. I'd gotten to know him better than myself. A brown furball who was comfortable lying on my palms. When we were crawling in the tunnel, he used to tell me amazing stories about his life. About the land of pink flamingos that looked like flying ice cream, and the Sun King who lived in the desert world and was friends with every living being. Friend had worked in the king's court as a butler. Oh, I could just picture him dressed in a luxurious tuxedo and walking with his head high. Elegance suited him so well. He had lost his right front paw, and whenever I put him on the ground, he'd hobble forward clumsily with persistence. The only person I could confide in with anything, that tough little spark. He woke me up. Have I been sleeping? Yeah, let's go, friend. Thank you for waking me up. I raised him up on my shoulders, and we went, on all fours, into the tunnel. My hands were growing tired, and friend was constantly tickling me with his tactile hair and breathing on my neck. Suddenly my hand came upon some formation on the floor. All the walls were smooth as silk, so the scratch clearly stood out. I could feel the letters. It was writing. It never ends. And it got to me. What if there was no end to this tunnel? And we were just blindly going anywhere, possibly forever. Where was he who'd written this?
Yume, we have to go on. You chose to follow the tunnel, and wherever it leads, it has to be better than this. Go, don't think.
Friend was right. I crept a few steps forward. Suddenly the floor took a turn downwards. Friend, can you see that? It's changing. We have to go deeper underground, but change has never felt this good. Friend laughed and took out his hat, the one he only wore on special occasions. I could see his fur shining. I turned on my back and slid down the slope, laughing in ecstasy. What fun! The slope was long, and I remember sliding and sliding. Bump! Just as the downhill ended, I found that a steep uphill began right after it.
Yeah, it's like a roller coaster, right, friend?
He smiled, and happiness filled my every muscle. I started climbing up the smooth uphill, which turned out to be harder than one might think. Climbing, slip. Climbing, slip. Climbing. We're almost up, I can feel it, friend. Then my hand felt the edge. I grabbed it with all my force and pulled us up, collapsing on my face. But never have I felt such satisfaction. Like every second you became overly excited over and over again, and each time feels like new and better than the last. As I gazed up forward, it was light. A very weak, just visible dim glow, but light. light. Hypnotized, not even feeling, I started to crawl toward the light, with my eyes nailed on the glare that, after a lifetime of darkness, felt like the sun. Friend, are you seeing what I'm seeing? It's light. Light, friend. Friend? Friend? Can you see it? I took Friend down from my shoulders and held him on my palms like so many times before in the night we'd spent together, our lifetime. Can you see the light, friend? It's so beautiful. Friend was dead. His fur is so soft. All this time in this filthy hole hasn't changed it. Sorry, buddy, your friend needs to come with me. Yeah, I understand. You're just doing your job. I stretched out my hands, holding Friend on my palms, and placed it in one of the billions of pockets on Death's glowing dark robe. His tiny body peacefully sank inside its final bed. I sure am gonna miss those frisky whiskers, just to feel them tickling my neck again. That's tough stuff. Look, I really gotta get going or I can lose my job. There's a lot of people dying right now, you know. Okay, that's alright. I'll just stay here by myself in this tunnel. Nothing feels like anything with Friend gone. Just go. I don't need any company. Oh man, don't do this. Fine, I'll just stay here for a second. She sat down, leaning against the opposite wall, and laid her shining scythe on the cold floor. Made no sound. Nice scythe. Looks brand new. Yeah, it is. They've got a great selection up there on the lower course of sticks. They used to make these beautiful handmade scythes, but nowadays it's all mass-produced with their baby scythe models and arms that come in every color imaginable. Grimace design scythes, because you deserve to die with style. Nothing can stop money. You're telling me. I've always wondered how you could take care of every dying person in the world. I mean, isn't that a hell of a busy job? Well, I have my happy helpers. But it's just so hard to find good workers these days. All of them are specializing to be elves. Sorry, Christmas time assistants or something gay like that. Sometimes I wonder why I do this. My daddy always wanted me to follow his footsteps and join the real estate business. But being deaf has been my dream since I was a kid, you know. There was something so fascinating and taboo about death. Now it's everywhere. People don't even recognize me on the streets anymore like they used to. Death sighed and pressed her head down. Her voice was oozing with sadness and lack of purpose. My life's been worth nothing. Nada. I always thought I was making people happy by killing them, but lately I've had doubts about if this job is really worth it. We just got a new HD TV on level 6, but you know, these suicidal teens, they just want to sit around and stare into space. Doesn't anybody have any respect for what I do? She broke out in tears and wiped her nose on the cloak of moaning souls. We cried together. Dying has become so easy. As soon as people have problems, instead of jumping onto the next phase in their lives, they jump down from their balconies. For 10 years I've been working non-stop because of these selfish, sad people who have no consideration for others' working hours. So, haven't you ever had a moment of weakness yourself? Ever thought of ending your life, or whatever you call it? I've had my worst times. Now that work has been piling up, I sometimes feel the urge to get it all over with, but that would be too easy. I have a responsibility, and giving in would mean betraying everyone. In the end, your life's pretty long, and every wound heals, even if just a little bit. What's hell like? Have you been to heaven? Nah, heaven doesn't exist. That was just made up so people wouldn't feel too bad. We have our richer areas as well as our ghettos in hell. But your life here doesn't affect that at all. In fact, it's usually the worst people who own the biggest houses up there. What can I say? Home sweet home. Death glanced at her Rolex and gasped. Hell, time just flies around here. I've missed thousands of clients talking here with you. She got up, took her scythe, and rushed towards the exit. Wait, take good care of friend. That's a promise. Hey, Death. Yes? Thank you. I walked up to her, and for a moment we didn't exchange a word. I could feel her leaning towards me. Suddenly I leant close to her and wrapped my arms around her. There we stood. Hand in hand we walked toward the white spot of light far away, and as we got closer I felt her disappearing. Along with the wind echoed a lonely whisper. In case you were wondering, I am a woman underneath this cloak. Just in case you happen to die alone. 8th movement. Painted lies. The sharp stench fumes in my nostrils. Baby steps feel the asphalt rough on their unused soles. Delicate sounds of the 1,000 footsteps echoing through the valley. What a welcome. I glanced back. Behind me stood a colossal rock wall. The endless tunnel that broke the otherwise smooth surface now looked like a pin stitch in the massive wall of stone. It's all relative, all right. The rock wall opened in 2 directions, and after miles joined together again. Inside the circle there was a wide open plain. In the middle of town, protected by a tall, luxurious golden fence. I was standing under the town's signboard. It was in every way the most glamorous sign ever presented, with jewel outlines shining like a million neon lights, and a pearl-white sign that didn't have a single flaw on its polished surface. But why had they left such a gorgeous sign empty? The sign saying absolutely nothing made me feel a chill that ran down my spine. I took a swing and kicked the enormous gilded gate with all the power I had. Nothing. I tried again. Not a sound. After dozens of desperate attempts to get someone to open the enticing but strong gate, I fell on the ground exhausted. How can such a beautiful place be alone here in the borderlands of everywhere and nowhere? Isn't there anyone here? I screamed hopelessly. I collapsed on the ground, tired and weak, gasping, coughing blood. Gate. It was opening. Before my surprised eyes opened, the street packed with people. But I don't mean a busy, eventful street. Everyone was walking around bent out of shape, staring at nothing and walking about aimlessly as if they had no place to go but were just doing it to be at least doing something. I got up and started taking steps toward the city. As soon as my toes crossed the gates, the passers-by started bumping into me, some slouching apathetically, some ferociously running into me with their mouths spuming. For all that, all of them had their eyes turned inward, whether they were spinning wildly or barely open. These wide-eyed people, who appeared to have completely lost their heads, kept running into me and tossing me about in the crowd. Hundreds of similar faces were flashing before my eyes. Let me go! Let me out! Suddenly I felt a light dab on my arm. Someone grabbed me with a tight grip and pulled me out of the moving crowd. I was out. I felt so free. My arms trying to grab and hug the space around me, liberated from the pressure of the foam-mouthed creatures. I found my eyes to be closed, and the hand I had to thank for freeing me had released its grip. I was sitting on the cracked asphalt and looked up. Over me stood a silhouette, a black figure with the sun's aura around it, glowing. Angel. Beautiful. Look at you mumbling, confused. The speechless only care for themselves and are anxious if you give them a chance, just like you said. Her voice had a strange but warm tone that made me feel like there was nothing else in this world. Mila! I tottered up. Is that the sun's glare in your eyes, or are you just happy to see me? Pressure of overwhelming happiness built up inside me, erupting as a few jumps and up and down, and last but not least wrapping my arms around her and squeezing, probably harder than was my intention. What a welcome. I haven't seen you in ages. How can you be here? But we just saw you. You left, slammed the door. Your words were prancing around the room and in my head, and I found myself lying in the blurb and feeling something cold on my neck. Then I was lying in a ditch over there, and I heard someone scream. So I pulled the screamer out to me. But it's been forever since everything I've been through. Mila's hypnotizing eyes, slightly pointy brown and green eyes with a light touch of light that shone right through you with every glance. Their beautiful flaws, nothing more perfect. In them I lost myself. Now I knew what that innocent glare reminded me of. It had caught my eye before. Friend had Mila's eyes. Both of them had looked at me with that glare. I saw it. I knew it. We're here, I whispered. Mila stared astonished as I leaned closer and touched her forehead with mine. Eyes, in her, in me. And we walked down the road, eyes turned inward. And oh, how the earth rumbled. The sky is like glass. Yume Mila was lying on the gently sloping housetop she'd climbed on, and had been driven to a state of half-sleep, half-awake by the indescribable easy ways and laziness this town bore upon itself. Absolute calm. The speechless didn't seem to notice it, running around non-stop in front of the gate. Their legs seemed to be living their own life, while in every other way being practically brain-dead. You could hear the stomping all through the night. The night. The sky is like glass, transparent, colorless. If I could have thrown a rock high enough, I probably would have bounced back or crashed through. Somehow I didn't remember to wonder why it felt strange. You were right, everything is somewhere. And this is better than my old place, I think. I think it is. It has a sound. I love the sound. I smiled crookedly, watching her lie there. I could have lived this second forever. And you humans are the only creatures dumb enough to be happy over something so purposeless and indefinable. Constant brain activity accompanied by profound philosophical ponderings and schemes to expedite the extinction of humankind is the most complete way of spending time. Oh, time, why must you betray me? Okay, I think it's time for somebody's diaper change. Mr. Cranky always comes out when my baby's tired. I'm not tired! Why must you parents always blame tiredness on your children's problems? Ever stop to think it might be the fault of your reckless ways of raising your misfortuned offspring? Cutie, cutie baby, who's behind the sleepy rag? Mommy, who is it, mommy? Mila was staring at her with very determined contempt and pity. You know, Milo, maybe you're just too wise to appreciate the beauty we have. I mean, have you ever stopped to look at a leaf? Or the twirling surface of a cup of cocoa? Life has its small miracles. We've just gotten used to them. He pfft at me and went back to meditating. I decided to take a quick stroll around the town, which still had a lot to be seen. Pushing myself up with my arms still thoroughly bruised, I sat on the homemade elevator that gave me a ride down to the street. There was a river running through the city which was violently interrupted by the strong walls around the town. Outside it couldn't be seen. The city's main population appeared to be the speechless, but they were always packed before the gate, who knows why. Besides myself, Mila and Milo, I hadn't seen anyone else normal. River. Slow. walked along the riverbank, since it was the only guide I had to help me navigate in this city. In the small stones that broke the flowing surface, there were white-eyed frogs running about wildly, but somehow staying on dry land, were it for luck or not. I looked up, and woman! An old lady was standing on a bridge over this troubled water. A human, still as a statue. I rushed up to her and stopped on the bridge. She was covered with ragged rags that were apparently serving the purpose of clothes. In her hand was a small leathery bag. She put her hand in the bag and calmly pulled something out. On her palm silently lay a shining gold coin. It had had some kind of engraving on it, but was now faded and platitudinous, with the printing barely visible. What an amazing tiny piece of art! Calmly the lady turned over her palm. Did ever show shining proof of outstanding craftsmanship, falling into the unreachable transparent surge. What are you doing? That coin was priceless. You could have bought yourself new clothes, do whatever you wanted. She pulled another coin out and calmly dropped it into the unreachable transparent surge with a déjà vu-like routine. As she was about to toss another misfortunate tear or gold into the river, I grabbed the arm. First silently staring at my hand that was wrapped around her fist, her wrist, and then lifting her head. Looking at me. What are you doing, little girl? Me? You were the one throwing these magnificent, unique gold coins into the river. You'll never get them back. And why are you calling me a little girl? What else would you be? You don't seem very large, so I called you little girl. With one sweep opening of a fist, she dropped the bag along with the coins into the river. I'm not a girl, are you crazy? She pushed me back and walked away, muttering something about the lunatics and how the world is going to hell. Wait till I tell the others. The tiny golden stars swam along with the water, circling the river inside the city time and time again. You... I mounted on her and pushed our foreheads together. You... We lay there, maybe forever, maybe for a second. In the middle of it, I suddenly saw a new green glare on Mila's face. Then a sharp wail, lost in Mila's eyes. They seemed far away. Night fell. It was darker than any night. The smarting smoke in my nostrils forcibly drew me back into now with a tight grip. Still wearing this unintentional crooked smile on my face, I glanced up to find the glass sky. It wasn't there. The sky was a mixture of dark and grey, with a menacing green glow behind it. What is this? The speechless were running around even more madly than before. Stomping and screams filled the air, and it was dark, oh dark. Mila's hand gripped me. Come on, what are you doing? My legs started running on their own. I didn't have to think. We pushed through the enraged crowd of the speechless that were bumping headlong into each other and screeching with an ear-ripping sound. They mangled my already bruised arms as I screaming my lungs out. The darkened shrine of the Golden Gate glared through the crowd. We rushed through, confused but with persistence, finally come to the gate step. It was closing, the gap only a feet wide. Mila pushed me close to her. We closed our eyes so tightly it hurt and jumped. For a second I couldn't feel anything. Slightly opening my eyelids, I saw blurry Mila, lying in the ground, gasping, carrying Mila. The gate stood dark and thunderous before us. Mila got up and together we ran up the hill, toward the rock wall. The air was thick with smoke and gas. Breathing felt like swallowing knives. Gasp, gasp, we ran uphill, not looking back, until we were in front of the grave entrance. Gasp, gasp, in the dark I looked back at the city. In the doomed dusk I saw massive green flashes shooting from somewhere behind the clouds at the sky. Flash, destroy, poisonous, confusion. Run away. I can't find my head.